14 years ago, I wanted to impress a friend of mine with a casually recorded video of me playing the Will and Grace theme, written by the great Jonathan Wolff, who, by the way, also did the music of the very successful TV show Seinfeld. So I went searching the internet up and down for decent sheet music, but I didn't like any of them. So much less casually than I had originally intended, I sat down and made my own transcription, which by now is floating around said internet. When my friend saw the video, he encouraged me to upload it to YouTube, so I did, and I received a lot of very nice comments from you people, which made me proud already. But after only a few weeks, the composer himself sent me an email complimenting me on my video and even commented publicly later on, which of course made me super proud. Over the years, people kept asking me to make a tutorial, and now, only 14 years later, here it is. Before I start, I want to point out that there already exist some tutorials made by other people which are probably of great help to those who don't read sheet music and just want to see the whole thing played through on piano keys in slow motion. But in this video, I want to go into more detail about why I think this piece is so hard to play and what you could take into consideration if you intended to learn it. Before I jump into the specifics, here is one general piece of advice that applies to anything you practice. Please practice small portions, not the whole thing at once, and choose the size of each portion in such a manner that it contains only one hard problem. If a portion contains too many things that are hard to do, you will probably fail at the second thing, because the first thing already tripped you up. If the portion that you practice is too long, you will constantly be overwriting your short-term memory, making it very hard for the learnings to reach your long-term memory. Please, not the whole thing at once. Okay, so much for the general piano teacher advice on practicing. Now let's talk about the main difficulties that need to be addressed so you can eventually play this piece at a decent tempo. Note repetitions. Quick repetitions of a single note occur very often in this piece. In fact, the piece starts out with 3 pairs of repeated notes. And repeating notes in quick succession is a matter of being able and ready to receive gifts from nature. By that, I mean not spending your own muscle energy if it can be avoided, if you can do something that is already given to you, like falling down, or inertia, like being already traveling in one direction. It's mainly your wrist that you need to teach the skill of bouncing off the keyboard like a rubber ball, spending only a tiny amount of energy on each rebound by getting the timing right. Simply because doing repetitions with the fingers muscles alone will make them fatigue quickly, and as a result, your forearm will cramp eventually. Hence, it's important to learn how to play 2 notes in such a manner that an active force is exerted only for the first note, and the second note is just a rebound. Like when you're on a trampoline, optimizing this rebound is a matter of timing. It is key to feel when it's the right moment to push yourself off just a tiny bit. You should be pushing yourself off the keyboard just before you reach the bottom of the key on your way down. On mechanical pianos, that point is where the resistance of the key slightly increases because it starts engaging the hammer mechanism. But regardless of what piano you're using, the rule of thumb is it should feel good, as though all your physical energy is well invested, and it should not tire your arm. This concept can then be extended to more than 2 notes, for example 1 active note and 3 rebound notes. Ideally, even that initial downward force does not come from your muscles, but just from the weight of your arm or hand. All that your muscles need to do is to adjust the fall rate just a little bit in order to control the volume. To teach your muscles to do that kind of adjustment, try to exaggerate the arm movement and let them drop from really high without hurting yourself, just for practice. Now, in those first 6 notes of the Will and Grace theme, there is an additional issue. I use these fingers for the first 6 notes. Because I need to move both hands to the left immediately after. That means I'm playing the last 2 notes with outside fingers of each hand, both of which don't play well with up and down wrist bouncing. The pinky is short and not very strong, and the thumb extends in a different direction, so it's also not very good for up and down bouncing of the wrist. They are much more effectively used by rotating the wrist. And that rotational component of the wrist movement is super important throughout this whole piece and throughout piano technique in general, and I will come back to that later. For now, it's just very important to see that out of the first 6 notes, those last 2 require a completely different wrist motion than the first 4. I'm exaggerating here, but it's about still doing a rebound while rotating the wrist, but doing a completely different motion. And that is something you could also practice separately. Sometimes the left hand has to repeat octaves, like this. However, it is mostly the right hand that needs to play octaves in quick succession, either on the same note or as a melody on different notes. The concept of bouncing can be applied here to make it less tiring for the muscles to play that many notes. As for the fingering, I use the thumb for the lower note and then the 4th finger on black keys and the 5th on white keys for 2 reasons. One. The risk of sliding off the black keys is a bit lower when I use a bigger and more stable finger. 2, the weakest fingers of the hand have to play the upper melody, and if I let them take turns, they don't fatigue as quickly. Still, playing those octaves with accuracy and without fatiguing is hard even when the fingering and the bouncing rhythm are right. The arm will cramp eventually if it doesn't know exactly what it's doing and where it's going, and by it I mean the entire arm, the shoulder, even your whole upper body. What I'm talking about here is called centering. Your whole upper body needs to know exactly how it must position itself in order to push the maximum force into the keyboard with the minimum effort. The important thing to acknowledge here is that a tiny variation of the hand on the keyboard, such as moving up a half step, can drastically change what the ideal alignment of the rest of the body would be. The sweet spot of centering is something that you cannot actively memorize because it's muscle memory that stores this kind of information in your brain and nervous system. What you can actively do is try different variations and actively sense whether it feels good, like you're sending all of your physical force in exactly the right direction. Try for each note individually to find that sweet spot and enjoy it for a second, or at least acknowledge that it feels better than all the other centerings you've tried. And then eventually your body will remember it and use that information automatically. You shouldn't expect that this knowledge that you're finding out with your body is always implemented immediately into your playing. It often takes a few days and some nights' sleep before your brain makes those new and improved connections more permanent and usable. Rhythm. The rhythmic concept of this particular piece of music is to keep the 16th note grid audible all the time, taka 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 taka, and to leave almost no rests in the combined rhythm of the left and right hand. As a consequence, the left hand often does not play the bass note of the harmony on the downbeat, but rather in seemingly random spots that would otherwise be unfilled, which are often offbeats or double offbeats. This might feel a bit unnatural, and it can be another source of irritation and cramping of the left forearm. Also, it's freaking hard to remember. This is why I would like to repeat myself here again. Not the whole thing at once, but rather pick one short phrase at a time.
Not the whole thing at once.
For example, a second bar. In places where the left hand just fills up the silence with 16th notes, it is worth practicing both hands together instead of hands separately, and to memorize the rhythm generated by combining both hands. Ideally, you should learn to sing or speak that rhythm, for example, by picking a bright or open syllable, such as da for the melody part and a dark or closed syllable for the bass part, such as gu. You should try to implement the accents and non-accents while you speak the rhythm. And this could sound as follows. da 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 dagu 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 dagu, something like that. And then it should be much easier to distribute that kind of sound back to the two hands. What also helps is practicing slowly while dialing the contrast between accented and unaccented notes up to 11. And so on. This will give your body an idea of which notes it has to spend energy on and which ones are just rebounds and opportunities to get some rest. The third hand. Besides bass, chords, and upper melody, the piece has something else going on that would normally require a third hand in the middle. It is mostly the note A near the middle of the keyboard that sometimes belongs to the melody, sometimes to the bass, and is generally far away from both. Depending on which hand happens to have enough time to travel to that A, that hand has to play it. So it's sometimes the left, sometimes the right. Not only is this shared responsibility pretty confusing, but it often requires that the hands travel a long distance in a short time. Again, two things that I mentioned earlier can help overcome that difficulty: rotation and centering. Your left hand will almost exclusively be employing the thumb and the pinky throughout the piece, so wrist rotation is your best bet if you want to keep your forearm from fatiguing too quickly. What I also invite you to check out for yourself is if you use the pinky plus rotation to reach a low note, and then the thumb plus rotation to reach that middle A, how far of a journey for the entire hand is it actually? It depends a little bit of the size of your hand, of course, but in general you might be overestimating the distance if you look only at the piano keys and not the fingers that need to play them. So this was my in-depth tutorial for the Will and Grace theme song, and before I conclude this video, there's just one more thing left to do. I have to play the whole thing better than 14 years ago. So here goes. So I hope this tutorial helped a little bit in case you want to learn this piece. And now what I would like to know is if you have already tried to and what your experiences were. Is there some problem that I didn't cover here and that you would like me to make a video on? Please let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, please help me beat the click count of my slightly younger self by giving this video a thumbs up and by subscribing to my channel. So have fun practicing. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.